Hello and welcome to this week's tutorial. I'm going to go over a couple of things that causes a little bit of confusion when you're actually editing. Number one is how to properly import your files. Number two, how to properly export your files. And number three, how to handle your files after you've actually begun editing. The first thing is, as you know, when you go shoot, you shoot on an SD card. When you come back and bring this SD card back, you are going to you're going to be inserting the SD card into the computer, and then from there you transfer your files into the folder, into your particular folder. Then you can start importing them from that folder to the timeline, to the Adobe Premiere timeline. You do not import the files directly from the SD card onto the timeline. Because what would happen there? Well, many things can happen. If you do that, number one, if tomorrow you start editing and you don't have your SD card with you, it can't find the files because the files are on the SD card. Number two, the other things that could happen is that it's going to basically be almost impossible to edit because it's going to be a very slow process. You see, your SD card is much slower than your hard drive on your computer. So what happens is that it tries to get the files from the SD card and it really can't keep up. So you'll have errors and your computer will freeze up and you'll have lag and other problems. So again, you transfer the files first from your SD card onto the actual folder in your desktop or wherever it may be. And then from there, you can import from the folder into the timeline. The other problem that usually occurs is that when people try to export their files, they try to export it to a USB. You can't do that. You have to export back into your folder. You have to use the folder that's on the desktop. In other words, you're using the hard drive on the computer. You cannot go directly to the USB. What you need to do is first export it to the folder. Once you export it to the folder, then you can drag and drop it into your USB. That's a very important issue that happens all the time, because if not, the computer will freeze and you will have problems. And if you even get to do it, it'll take like 10 times longer. So again, it's for the same reason. The USB is not a fast device. Not faster than your hard drive on your computer. So that's the problems that happen when you go directly from exporting it directly into the USB. You can't do that. It's got to go to your folder. And another thing is when you're exporting your file, it's a good thing to name it final. That way you know it's your final copy. If you have more than one final copy, you could call it Final 1, Final 2, of course with the name that it pertains to. So if you're doing a story about donations, blood donations or something like that, you could put blood donations final 1 or final 2. That way you know it's the final movie that you've made or the clip. And then the last thing, whenever you start importing your files and you start working on your timeline, it is very important that at that point, once the files are into Adobe Premiere, especially on the timeline or even imported into Adobe Premiere, do not change the name of the files. Like, don't go back out to the folder to your files and change the names of them. And don't move the files around. If you imported them into your folder called, in my case, Rudy Diaz blood donation package, and it's inside that folder, leave it there. Don't move it around now to another folder, because then the computer's gonna say is, where are those files? Where are those files located? It doesn't know. You've moved them. So that'll cause other issues. Very simple. Once you import the files into your folder, leave them there. And then begin to edit. And don't touch them. Don't move them around. And the last thing, which is very important, is to remember that when you save a project, you're saving only basically the timeline. Okay? It's different than when you're exporting a clip. When you're exporting a clip, you're exporting one file that is your final movie. But when you're saving a project, you're basically saving that file so that you can come back tomorrow and continue to edit. Don't think that when I tell you, okay, I need the file for the newscast, for example, don't go ahead and now and save it as a project. All it's going to do is in the next computer, it's going to open up Adobe Premiere and then tell you that all your files are missing because none of them are on that USB. And that's just not what I want. Okay, so it's almost equivalent to, if I was going to make a comparison, it's almost equivalent to, let's say you're starting to write a story on a word processor, and you just save the file, and you come back tomorrow and continue working on your story. The difference between that and then if I tell you I need a copy of it, then you go ahead and print it out and you bring me a copy of it. I guess that's a little bit of a comparison there. But you know, just understand that when you're save as, or you're saving the movie, the project, I'm sorry, you're saving the actual project. You're saving the project within Adobe Premiere. You're not exporting the clip. In order for us to use the clip, you have to export it. Okay? Thank you very much.